Hello and welcome back to the Baggies podcast YouTube channel, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Back again today with another video. Today I suppose we're going to be posing the question, what's going wrong with West Bromwich Albion, or what's gone wrong at the club for us to be sat in this really awful mess in the mid-table of the Championship, 11th in the table, when many, including some Albion fans, expected the club to go up into those automatic promotion spots by the end of this season. It's not quite happened, and yeah, I'm here to sort of give you some reasoning as to why. So we're going to go through several different sort of talking points, and then of course I've invited you yourselves on Twitter to give your thoughts in as well, and I'll be reading out some of your answers towards the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. If you dropped your comment in on Twitter, it's best sticking around because chances are I will read it out. I'd love to hear from you guys on YouTube as well. In the comment, make sure you drop your comments about what you think is going wrong at West Bromwich Albion at the moment. Do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's one of the reasons I'm going to say in the next 10 minutes or so, or do you think it's one of those that the people of Twitter have put in? But if you've got your own, drop them down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them. But yeah, let's crack on. Before we get into it, actually subscribe to the Baggies podcast channel. That would be an amazing thing if you could do that. Obviously past 1,000 subscribers now. Really enjoying doing the YouTubing and the podcast at the moment. So yeah, be sure to keep subscribing and keep dropping your comments with your thoughts on the video. But yeah, let's crack straight on and chat about what is going wrong at West Bromwich Albion. You're watching the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel. For match previews, match day vlogs, match reactions and more, make sure to subscribe to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel. Right, so let's crack on with my sort of part of the video, and then of course we'll get on to yourselves over on Twitter. Obviously we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get involved in future Baggies podcast videos. But if we start with sort of the base level of things at the club at the moment, of course we're really not in the situation that, you know, Albion fans want to be in. The club is looking, I think, over its shoulder rather than in front of it, and I think that's sort of a metaphor really for the way the club's been behaving or acting and taking their decisions over a real period of time now. You know, it's always been looking over its shoulder, you know, looking at the short term rather than looking right ahead and seeing how far can we push what we've got here. I think, you know, things have gone really downhill over the past couple of years, and this season I think we're starting to sort of see it all unravel, all these short-term plans sort of just be ripped apart, and all of a sudden the sort of league position we're sat in is sort of staring at us saying, why didn't you pick some sort of long-term plan to go with? So yeah, I'll start with base level. I'll start with the players. I think that's probably one of the reasons as to why things are going a little bit wrong at West Brom. I say a little bit wrong at West Bromwich Albion at the moment. I think there's a lot of players here, you know, that are on decent Championship wages, if I have to be completely honest. You know, there's several of those players that, you know, are earning a fair bit in comparison with the number one performances that they are on at the that they're producing at the moment, but also the money that they're on at the moment. You know, let's have a look at some of the sort of wages that some of the players are on. I think, you know, there's a fair bit, to be honest, of some of these players, and you know, you look at them and, you know, there's some that are unknown, but you look at people like you know, Johnston, and you know, there's quite a few people on top Championship wages at the moment. Apparently Kenneth Sahor's on close to £40,000 a week, which is, you know, pretty terrible considering the amount of time that he's played actually in the squad. And you know, the players, considering they're paid top Championship dollar, as the league table suggests, at 11th in the table, you know, they're certainly not putting in those top dollar Championship performances that get you promoted and get you, you know, albeit another wage rise into the Premier League, but certainly a step up back into the Premier League. You know, I think that, you know, to be able to buy into any manager, I think that you have to be able to put that 100% effort in, whatever sort of, you know, throughout those first few weeks as a new manager at a club. The players have to buy into him, you know, even if they are sort of a fridge, you know, sort of like a fragile sort of group that we've got at the moment. You know, you know, you have to give the manager, you know, at least a few weeks to try and implement something. And at the moment, you know, through the few weeks that we've seen Steve Bruce in charge for, we've not really seen any sort of adaptation from the players. Whether that, well, I'm not going to say that's down to Steve Bruce. I think that the problems lie a bit deeper than him. But certainly the players have to stand up and be counted. And at the moment, I'm not seeing very much effort, desire, passion. Heart, I think, is the big thing. You know, I saw Chris Wilder against Middlesbrough. Putting like when, you know, Middlesbrough were trying to see the game out, he was putting his hand on his heart like this, and is saying, come on, keep pushing, keep pushing. It's just remarkable the sort of differences in of levels in effort that we're actually being beaten by sides that, in my opinion, I don't think have as much quality as us. I think there are some players in our squad that have some decent quality and are good championship players and could be in that top six race. But there's a number of them I think just aren't putting in the required amount of effort and are being outworked by a lot of sort of average championship side in a very, very poor championship this season. There's not too many sides that I would say. I don't actually think there is a side that I would say could comfortably stay up the next season. Of course, there is the the summer transfer window where they can improve. But as it stands, I'm not convinced that any team in the division could comfortably stay in the Premier League. And there's a lack of leaders really in Albion's squad at the moment. There's plenty of players who I think, in terms of their senior ability, the amount of games they've played in professional football, both at the top level and second tier level, should be able to stand up and say, right, this isn't good enough sort of thing. But it seems like it's a real infectious spread across the squad of sort of settling for substandard performances and settling for almost crumbling after going that goal behind and stuff like that. There's just a real weak mentality, and whether that's a case of employing a sports psychologist or something, maybe it is. But at the moment, the players do not look like they are giving their all at the moment, and it's very frustrating. But yeah, that's my little bit on the players. I mean, I say that, but if there are some with a lack of quality in the squad, and of course you can't really coach quality into some players, but certainly when there is a lack of quality, you have to see 100% effort to make the grade. And that's not what we've seen from the players so far this season. So there's my thoughts on them. On to, I think, managers, I think, is a big topic as to why things are going wrong at West Brom. I think, firstly, you start with, it's not the manager's fault when they get appointed. I think that's probably something that probably needs to be remembered about now. Obviously, they've taken the job, but the board are the ones making the decision and pointing the finger at the manager that they particularly want. I think more the thing about managers, obviously Val Ismail was showed that he wasn't going to work at Albion and it wasn't a good fit. He was obviously a manager that was used to managing an underdog side, West Brom in this division, although they are becoming an underdog side, certainly weren't at the beginning of this season and were a side that was expected to go up. And obviously, Val lacked that flexibility to change his tactics and move things around accordingly. So, yeah, obviously you can tick Val off as sort of one of the poorer managers that we've seen over the past 10 years or so. But definitely, you have to put. I suppose this does go on to my next sort of points about the board and everything about that. But the lack of consistency between the managers, but the sort of real consistency between the same players under different managers has been quite worrying. Playing staff at the manager's disposal has been the same, for 3 years, I suppose now. Some of these players have been, just sort of settling for that starting spot, and it's quite worrying how many players have become senior players, and there hasn't been too many fresh faces to sort of liven things up a little bit. And I think that some of the managers haven't been good enough, but I certainly think that with some sort of backing, some fresher faces, not having to deal with the same sort of cliques that are in the dressing room at the moment would have probably helped a great deal in moving forward and keeping ourselves going. But yeah, it's just a little short point on the manager, because obviously you can't blame a manager. Well, I suppose you can, but you can't blame a manager for being appointed or given the role. Obviously, some of the managers aren't good enough, but it's certainly not their issue it's not their problem if they've been appointed. Somebody has pointed the finger at them to say, and obviously we'll talk about the board in just now, I suppose. I wanted to talk a little bit about lack of investment and lack of knowledge on the board level. I think is quite worrying. The lack of footballing brains, I think, is probably my biggest thing that's wrong with things at the moment. The board haven't backed too many managers. I think probably the only manager that under the current ownership or controlling shareholding from Guochuan Lai, I think probably Slaven Bilic comes closest to being backed. Obviously, he brought in a couple of signings for pretty hefty, well, I suppose for us, reasonable fees. Obviously, you've got your Dean Garner, you've got your Carlin Grant, who came in. I think they were combined probably 35 million or so, or something along those lines. So, the board, haven't really backed too many of the managers that come under their reign, and not managers can do something with zero budget or nothing. Obviously, lots of managers can come and get the best out of what they've got, but when you're dealing with what has been described as a pretty a group of players that have thrown a manager under the managers under the bus. I think it's quite worrying that the board are still just sort of waiting for the manager to come in and tame them all. And I think that manager probably was Slaven Bilic, but I think a lot of the players obviously let Bilic down with the fitness plans during lockdown. But I think there's not too many managers who can function with zero budget. I think there's some that can do a little bit, but they do need their own players on side. They need somebody to come in, especially in a squad like this. And I hope that Alex Mowat would be that for Ishmael. Obviously, a player that's come under his reign before, has played games under Ishmael before, and could hopefully bring a little bit of experience into his philosophy and what he wants to do. But towards the end of Ishmael's reign, obviously, we saw that Mowat was just as probably bad as the rest. But the general lack of knowledge on the board level about football and about what it means to fans and stuff like that has been, it caused several issues really at the club. There's been so little investment, but when it has been made, largely it's been in the wrong players. And you have to have those footballing heads on the board to make things better. And hopefully, if you do have little investment, like perhaps we have over years. You look at the Dan Ashworth days, of course, they're ones that I think a lot of Albion fans, and including myself, will pine for now. The amount of money that he spent on very, very decent very decent Premier League level players, sorry. So Peter Odemwingie, of course, the market has inflated since then, but Peter Odemwingie was, I think, 1.5 million, went on to score goals for us. Gareth McCauley was a free transfer. Claudio Jacob cost peanuts, I think. Maybe this wasn't under Ashworth, but people like Chris Brunt, James Morrison, these people, they're not only just hard workers, but which I think is what we're missing, but they were absolute steals at their price to come in and play in a Premier League side that was really in its heyday. So yeah, I think the lack of investment and knowledge on board level, I think, is probably a real issue, and I think that's probably the growing gripe. Along with something that that I'll call the recruitment structure at the club. The amount of sort of random, desperate sort of signings made, it's pretty out of hand. Some of the deals that we've done over the past few years, have got to be some of the worst in history. I look at right back to the start of Guochen Lai's reign when he bought Yuning Zhang in. The Chinese striker who never actually played a game for us, and he must have cost about £6 million. £6 million. A few years ago was a decent level Premier League player. You look at the amount, and the same with Kenneth Sahor, really, another really random signing to make when you're spending £8 million on Kenneth Sahor and you've only spent 7.5 on somebody like Mateus Pereira. Let's face it, that just shows a lack of consistency in your recruitment. You're signing players for the similar price range. One is going to be a Premier League player and could be more, and one is probably not going to make the Championship grade again. But to be honest, there's so many different deals that I could go through to talk about that. Obviously, Dean Garner and Grant are looking to be pretty poor deals, but I ultimately think that those two players have what it takes to succeed at Championship level, and to be honest, they just look a shadow of their former selves in this division. I think the past summer's transfer business as well needs to be mentioned. I think that's left, as more weakened than we went into it with. Obviously, as coming down from the Premier League, you're always going to have exits. You're always going to have people. Pereira obviously wanted to leave, clashed horns with Ishmael. I think Ishmael probably saw the dollar signs in his eyes when Pereira was falling out with him and probably thought, right, let's get him out of the club and let's get some money in. But in the end, that money wasn't really reinvested in the squad. Of course, it has been with DK. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that that's probably come out of... Let's not kid ourselves or get ahead of ourselves with thinking that that's come out of Guochen Lai's pocket. I would probably assume that that's part of the parachute payments that he didn't give us, or money that he didn't give us in the summer. So, the short-term vision that's often implemented, I think it really goes above, what we've been doing. I think, the plan that to get our club forward, I think, has been really, really lacking, and that's a worrying thing for me. So yeah, I think that's disappointing to see, and I think the lack of clear plan has really been worrying. We've always gone for the short-term option, and as I said at the start of the video, it's always left us sort of in the lurch a little bit, and it always ends up with releasing 6 or 7 players in the summer when of course you're never going to get every signing right. That's one thing I will stress. You're never going to get every deal correct. You will waste some money inevitably, but the money you gain could be much bigger than the money that you lose if you employ a real footballing head at the top. Obviously, Dan Ashworth was was the guy that we really thrived under. But there surely would be more like him if we really searched. But if there are no footballing brains on the board, I feel that there is little opportunity to progress. So that's sort of my thoughts on what's gone wrong with West Bromwich Albion. It's really frustrating. And, the lack of football knowledge has really hurt us. So I'm going to go into some of your comments now. So let's head over to Twitter and take a look at what you guys replied to my tweet earlier. I put out this one. What reasons would you give for the club being in the position it is right now? I will use your answers in this weekend's video, of course. And you guys replied, and you replied in great numbers. So, yeah, I'll start with Matt, of course. Matt from the WBA Report podcast, which is always worth a listen if you haven't already. Matt's been on the Baggies podcast a couple of times now, I think. So, yeah, here's what he said as to what he thinks is going wrong. He said, take a pick from a lack of investment from the top, absence of leadership from the top, short-term strategy integrated within the club, no footballing knowledge within the board, dreadful senior appointments, questionable recruitment strategy, and poor communication with fans. Yeah, he's echoed quite a few of those points that I just made, but the poor communication with fans is probably a one that I missed out there. I think that's really, really pivotal. You see a lot of clubs now. I think Villa probably did it quite well when Grealish left and spoke, the guy who is in charge there that I can't remember the name of, spoke quite well about that and spoke about how that's why he's decided to sell Grealish, why he's decided to let him go, and all that sort of jazz. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point from Matt. There's not really any communication. Obviously, there is the Albion Assembly that goes on, not too often, to be honest, but there's so many examples of good communication with fans. But I think Albion at the moment are a real mark of poor communication with fans. But yeah, let's crack on and go to Dan Tudge. Thank you for sending that in, Dan. Changing vision, make a plan and stick with it. When it starts going wrong, alter it and don't rip it up and throw it away, i.e. sacking Bilic for Big Sam. So many examples of this too. Yeah, I think that's been echoed here, Dan, with your thoughts there. I think there's too many chopping and changing between styles, managers. If you stick with one, or if I look at a team like Barnsley, who, although I haven't been doing very well this season, let's face that, they really haven't, and they've been pretty poor. But they've got a series of managers almost lined up who all play a similar brand of football, would all suit the same style of football. But again, that comes down to having football people on the board. So I feel like that's another thing. Obviously, we don't aspire to be Barnsley. We may end up being Barnsley soon, but certainly not the case. Not something we want to aspire to be, but certainly in their recruitment strategy, it's certainly worth doing. See, Hawthorns has sent this one in. A huge factor in ownership is Dan Ashworth leaving has had a reaching impact, I think. Poor key decisions and recruitment over the last 4 to 5 years due to the lack of real football knowledge and investment has led us to where we are today. Absolutely, from C. Hawthorns, absolutely spot on. Worrying signs at the Albion, especially with the football knowledge on the board, as I've said so many times in this video. Barry Fireside has said, poor management, above team and head coach, short-term planning with no outlook to the future, academy shambles. That's something I haven't mentioned there. You've got so many academy players that obviously have gone off and left the club, but maybe haven't reached the levels that we thought they might. But there are certainly some, and I look at Taylor Gardner-Hickman, poor lad on the bench, who can't get into a midfield over Jason Malumbi, Alex Mower and Adam Reach, who I think that Taylor Gardner-Hickman would do a sterling job instead of. So, yeah, you've got too many managers, head coaches that have taken any identification from the team and bad signings. So, yeah, thank you for that one, Barry. Here's one from the Rainbow Stand, the WBA Rainbow Stand account, who says Luke Dowling is a major part. So, yeah, I think some of the decisions that he made, obviously the one decision that we sort of wish he'd have taken, of course, we believe that Chris Wilder, the potential appointment of him was down to Luke Dowling. So it's a shame to see that one obviously got turned away by the owners, which I think was baffling. I said when that appointment was reportedly sort of ripped up by Guach Line, I said, why is he getting involved for? He genuinely doesn't know anything about football. But obviously Luke Dowling was at the helm for quite a few of these pretty poor recruitment decisions. I think I think he was technical director. So yeah, absolutely, Luke Dowling has played his part in that with some of the decisions made. Bob Taylor says, awful recruitment, handling contract extensions to players past their best, not using academy players appropriately, no plans in place when manager sacked. Yeah, absolutely. From Bob, who also says, an owner who isn't bothered and players with awful attitude, no pride. Yeah, I think no pride sums up what the players, have really been dishing out of late. You know, there's no heart, there's no sort of digging deep to get a performance out. It's been pretty shocking. And our final comment from Mogster, who says, shockingly bad recruitment and bad club management since Ashworth left. Yeah, we do miss Dan Ashworth, who is set to join Newcastle United and start pulling the strings for them. But yeah, that's all of your thoughts on Twitter. If you want to get involved in the next video, be sure to go and follow us at the Baggies Pod on Twitter. And of course, just keep an eye out and follow us on there to get those sort of tweets that you guys can reply to and get yourselves involved in the video. But I think we've really chewed the fat in terms of what's going on at West Bromwich Albion. Make sure you comment your thoughts down below. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.